Good morning. I'm Andrew Willis, and this morning I would like to acquaint you with the subject of keyboard temperament. In a brief and highly condensed survey, we'll hit the high points of the various systems of tuning that developed from medieval through Renaissance, Baroque, and modern times. I hope this will help you understand the issues that arise in determining pitch assignments for a keyboard instrument with a 12-note octave. All tuning systems start from mathematical premises. In ancient Greece, the philosopher-scientist Pythagoras discovered that pure intervals could be generated on a monochord by using simple ratios. A monochord is a scientific instrument, diagrammed here in a side view. The orange line across the top is the wire that vibrates, and the speaking length is marked L. As you can see, it is a simple matter of measurement to divide the length of the string into smaller units. Pythagoras discovered that simple ratios produce pure musical intervals that we know as an octave, 2-1, a perfect fifth, 3-2, a perfect fourth, 4-3, and a major third, 5-4. These correspond to the physical phenomenon known as harmonics, overtones, or partials. There is, however, a fly in this lovely mathematical ointment. A 12-note keyboard instrument needs to close the circle of fifths, which is to say that C must be identical to B sharp if we follow the fifths sequence C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, B sharp. If we use the Pythagorean ratio of 3-2 for all these fifths, we will come face to face with the unpleasant fact that C and B sharp are not the same pitch at all. And if we tune B sharp to be consonant with C, it will create an intolerably out-of-tune fifth with E sharp. That fifth was considered so unpleasant and dangerous that it came to be called the wolf. We can demonstrate the problem inherent in the physics of tuning more concisely by following a path using the pure major third ratio, 5-4. I've tuned just 4 notes on this harpsichord to show what happens when we stack up a pure major third, C-E, a second one, E, G sharp, and a third one, G sharp, B sharp. Each of these thirds sounds smooth and consonant, quite lovely and soothing, in fact. But look what has become of our octave C, B sharp. It's a problem. Now, these two situations are not precisely the same. The discrepancy generated by the stack of pure thirds, known as the lesser diesis, you don't need to worry about remembering that, is larger than the discrepancy generated by the circle of pure fifths, which is known as the Pythagorean comma. The important point is simply that the physical laws of nature do not permit a keyboard instrument of 12 notes to be tuned with nothing but pure intervals. Somewhere in the system, the ratios have to be fudged a bit in order to absorb and disguise the discrepancy that produces out-of-tune octaves. I'm going to pause for a moment and repair our unfortunate C. Over the course of time, different systems for tuning keyboards prevailed in various eras. each sounding quite well within the musical style of its day. We are going to touch upon four of the most important of these, but it's well to keep in mind that there were many variants in use at any given time, and that we are painting in broad strokes in order to indicate the large trends. The four tunings we will examine are Pythagorean, applicable in late medieval times, mean tone, prevalent during the Renaissance, well-tempered, typical of the Baroque era, and equally tempered, a modern system that drove out most others during the 19th century. Each has certain advantages and disadvantages, and each reflects well the musical style of its time, so it's best to put aside notions of an inexorable progress towards ultimate perfection. In fact, a great pleasure of living in this century is that we can match our tuning to the repertoire being played, particularly when using historical instruments like harpsichords and fortepianos. So, to begin with some of the earliest keyboard repertoire that has been preserved, let's listen to an excerpt from a piece by Francesco Landini, a blind Italian organist who lived in the 14th century. This keyboard piece is based upon a three-part song called Che pena è quest'al cor, or What Pain is in My Heart, and it represents what is known as a song intabulation, a keyboardized version of a vocal piece that adds lots of running decoration to the melody. In this late medieval era, Pythagorean tuning was the norm. It produces the maximum possible number of pure fifths. And indeed, most of the resting points in this piece are on octaves, unisons, and fifths. Here is the excerpt by Landini. By the time of the Renaissance, roughly 1450 to 1650, modal harmony based upon the hexachord had come into use. From a modern perspective, we perceive the hexachord as the first 6 notes of a major scale. Ut, as they call do, re, mi, fa, sol, and la. Although it is important to realize that in this system, those 6 degrees are perfectly self-sufficient and not an incomplete scale. In hexachordal theory, the distinction between the major third, ut, re, mi, and the minor third, re, mi, fa, is important. But we are still far from a system of major and minor keys with strong tonic-dominant polarity. The tuning system which works best for the Renaissance modes is called mean tone because each whole tone is half the size of a pure major third. Thus, re is the mean of the 2 pitches ut and mi. The important point for our ears is that the usable major thirds are pure, which produces a very smooth and restful triad sonority. Many recipes were used to obtain slightly different flavors of mean tone, but they all produce thirds that are pure and fifths that are not. In fact, fifths in mean tone are somewhat narrow, that is, closer together than if they were pure. I won't say flat because that implies poorly tuned, which is not the case. We call fifths that are squeezed closer together in this way tempered, and this is the source of the term temperament, that is, a system for tempering or narrowing the fifths. I've tuned one register of this harpsichord in mean tone and would like to play for you on it a Galliard by William Byrd. This is a vigorous dance in triple time with lots of triads. Byrd was the leader of a school of keyboard composers who flourished in the time of Shakespeare and Queen Elizabeth I. They are known as the English Virginalists, after the name of the rectangular plucked keyboard instrument popular at the time and known as the virginals. You may notice a certain informality in the use of major and minor triads, which is characteristic of modal harmony. I hope you'll also hear and enjoy the clarity and shine of chords tuned with pure thirds. Now, for all the attractiveness of this tuning system, it has certain limitations. There is a price to be paid for all those pure thirds, namely, that the remaining thirds are so wide, or sharp if you prefer, as to be unusable. That means that the number of triads available is not complete. We have the following usable triads. But we also have a number of unusable ones. And that's one reason that we don't find those tones conceived as roots in this modal harmony. And there's still that wolf fifth that threatened us in the Pythagorean tuning. So, we face fairly serious musical limitations in this tuning. As musical practice developed toward the major-minor triadic system of the Baroque era, let's call that 1650 to 1750, composers and players began to feel the need to increase the number of usable chords and intervals. Many new tunings were invented in an effort to reduce the number of wolf intervals and expand the number of usable ones. This expansion of intervals facilitated the use of major and minor keys with strong tonal centers and dominant tonic relationships. The dominant was no longer perceived as a neighboring hexachord, but as part of a tonic scale that included a seventh note, the leading tone. One effect of this conception is transposability. If one could write in C major, why not in B major or even F sharp? A tempered scale that would allow a tolerable triad to be played on any chromatic pitch was greatly desired in order to maximize the number of usable keys. Any tuning system that produced this result came to be called well-tempered, a term I'm sure you've heard of in connection with Johann Sebastian Bach's great collection of preludes and fugues in all 24 major and minor keys. That's what the title, The Well-Tempered Clavier, means. Literally, the keyboard tuned so that it can be played in every key. What it does not mean is the keyboard tuned so that all intervals and keys sound the same. Well-tempered tunings contain various combinations of pure fifths and tempered fifths that result in a variety of major thirds, some more pure and some less so. In a well-tempered scale, keys with few accidentals in the signature, such as C, F, and G, have very restful, stable triads because their major thirds are more pure, while those with many accidentals, such as C sharp, F sharp, and B, have vibrant, energetic triads thanks to their less pure thirds. Here are some chords with purer thirds in the well-tempered system: C, F, and G. If I go up a half step to the key of C sharp and its related triads, we have less pure thirds and more vibrant sound. For direct comparison, here's C major and C sharp. Thus, while all the keys are entirely usable, they do not all produce the same effect. To demonstrate this, I'd like to play for you two contrasting preludes from the second book of the Well-Tempered Clavier by Bach. The first is in G major, in which the smooth and sweet triads suit very well the pastoral lyric character of the material. And the second is in B major, whose strong triads lend energy to the bustling quality of the material. The tuning is well-tempered, according to a recipe that some believe was Bach's own favorite. First, the G major prelude. And now, the B major prelude. Now, since this harpsichord has only 2 registers, I've come to the end of the tunings I can demonstrate for you in person. But I have one more recorded example I'd like to play that I hope will help you hear a difference between well-tempered tuning and equal-tempered tuning. The principle of equal temperament, our modern system, is quite simple. All fifths are tempered by exactly the same amount, 1/12 of the Pythagorean comma, which makes all intervals of the same type sound alike, and by extension makes all keys sound alike. It's a practical tuning in some ways, certainly a very democratic one, but it no longer contains any of the pure mathematical ratios that so fascinated our friend Pythagoras. No interval is pure except for the octave, which means that all fifths are tempered narrow and all major thirds are tempered wide. Some years ago, a pianist named Susan Halligan became fascinated with the sound of a well-tempered tuning known as Kernberger 3, after the theorist who devised it, who incidentally had studied with J.S. Bach. Halligan recorded Beethoven's Diabelli variations on a modern grand piano tuned in Kernberger 3. And fortunately for us, she also included a bonus track in which she plays the theme from Beethoven's Variations on God Save the King, first in equal temperament and then in Kernberger 3. By listening carefully, you may be able to detect a subtle difference in the expressive effect of these tunings. Because equal temperament is the more familiar, let's start with it. And now, here is the same excerpt in Kernberger 3 tuning. That wraps up our brief tour of some historically important keyboard tunings. I hope it has helped you start to hear tuning as a choice we make, with consequences for our perception of music. Thank you for joining me today.